All right. Well, welcome back. And I am so happy to be here with Mary. Mary, thank you for being willing to be on the podcast and chat about not only how we know each other, but just your relationship with alcohol and any thoughts, advice that you might have for anyone based on your experience. So, would you like to introduce Shame Over listeners to who you are?
Sure. My name's Mary Reid, and I was a career drinker from probably the time my first drink, and didn't go out for get reached out for support until my mid-40s, and became involved with an organization called Moderation Management. I had heard about that back in my 20s, but at the time there wasn't a big community of it. There were meetings held in the big towns, larger cities, but I didn't live in a large city, so it was hard to get the support that I needed. But it was reassuring to me at that time because this was the early '90s, and at that time I was going through nurses training, so I was working with in rehabs. I was working in mental hospitals, and the whole thing out there was like, if you worry about your drinking at all, you have a problem and you're an alcoholic and you need to abstain and go to AA or rehab. And so that was all that was out there. So when in the early '90s, um, there was a woman called Audra Kishline, and she started showing up on the talk shows, and and all of a sudden she was introducing this thing called moderation management, where you could actually, that reducing was possible.
Mhm.
And so that was a glimmer of hope for me, but there was not, like I said, there was not the support available. So, I tried to do it on my own for 20 plus years. Plus back then, really pushed that you had to do 30 days abstinence. And I was, before you joined or if you were going to moderate. And I knew I couldn't do that. So anyway, fast forward 40 years, my drinking was out of control. I was drinking around the clock, getting up in the middle of the night to drink wine to get my palpitations under control. Um, I knew I had to do something, but I still wasn't ready for AA. And I probably knew I needed to abstain at that point. I was starting to have some physical dependence. But I just, I was living a lifestyle. I was actually living on a sailboat and, going to meetings, which is their foundation, their cornerstone, was just not possible. And when I joined their online community, because now you did have online support communities, um, they basically told me if you're not willing to go to a meeting, then you don't want it bad enough. So I decided to look and see if MM had an online community at that time. Again, this is like 20 years later, 15 years later, and they did. So that's where I've been ever since. I abstained after a year of trying moderation, which I did not do well at. Obviously, I abstained for about 8 years, and then decided I was no longer the same person I was, and I had some tools, and decided to moderate again. So here I am, 15 years in almost with MM and moderating. Um, I'm happy right now with where my drinking is. I wouldn't say it's perfect. There's always room for improvement. But right now I'm pretty comfortable for the first time when it comes to including alcohol in my life. I feel like I do have the tools to control it. Whether I make the choices to all the time, that's a different matter.
Oh, absolutely. The tools are the biggest thing, but we could have all the tools in the world, and if we choose not to use them, then yeah, we've all been there
Yeah,
as well. Thank you for sharing
right.
that. And so what, because I was in the same boat with you, everything I was out there, everything that I was finding out there was basically like, if you're even looking up like how to drink less, you should never drink again, and you have a problem. And I'm like, one, didn't feel like that was the case for me. And two, the thought of abstaining for, 30 days or whatever was just not only unnecessary, definitely a little bit of fear in there, didn't want to have to try it in
Right.
case I failed, but it was just that. It was so overwhelming, and I I knew that if that was the only option, that was not going to work for me. So, um,
Right.
what thinking back, and granted, I know it's been a few years, but
Uh-huh.
was there anything going on that kind of helped you to stick with it instead of just being like, okay, it's either all or nothing? Like any tools that really helped early on for you as you were getting started with this journey?
Well, as I said, when I first joined MM, and even, I joined in 2010. So they've been around then by, well, I guess 15 years, 16 years. And, they were still pushing the 30 days, but I finally I just thought, I don't know how they thought I thought they were going to track this. I just thought, I'm just going to join and not do the 30 and not tell them about it. So at that time there was what we had with forum and a listserv, and I don't mean to push MM because there's so much out there now that can help people that want to reduce their drinking, but back in that time MM was basically the only game in town. So they had a listserv, and it was not a formal program. It still isn't really a formal program, and people would throw out, it was just peer to peer, it was people would throw out some uh, tools every once in a while, like time your drink, play the movie to the end, think about what's going to happen. Those didn't work for me. And I did get talked into trying a 30 after my first month at MM. And I guess I had made enough positive change at that point to, to actually consider it, because I jumped on and I did reluctantly and tried it, but I made it over 30 days, which is a lot longer than I had since, I was pregnant in my 20s.
Yes.
And so that first year I kept going for that 30, like 6 or 7 times, and never made it. At the end of the year, I felt like a total failure. I couldn't moderate. I could maybe moderate for a week at a time. And then I'd binge like I'd always done. And then I'd go and try to go abs again. But I kept a really simple calendar. We didn't have like drink counting apps back then. Um, and it said they call it Mary's Mad Calendar, because I would write down M if I moderated, abs if I abstained, or A for abstaining, and then D for drunk. And you know, the M's and the D's are pretty pretty. The D's are probably winning over the M's, but I had actually abstained for 66% of the year, which was just unheard of for me. So that's when I chose abstinence, because I had finally gotten comfortable at it. Now, I am not somebody that likes to track. I do not do a tracking app. I know how I'm doing in my head and whether I'm good with myself. But that was my basic tracking that kind of showed me I wasn't as big a failure as I thought I was. So then fast forward 8 years, and I can't really tell you what I made the decision, why I made the decision. I had never said I was going to quit drinking forever.
Mhm.
I just knew someday I'd be ready for it again. And I had come up with the Kickstart program at MM. I had created it and written it. And I was like, here I am teaching all these tools to people. And they seem very doable to me now. I know who I am now. That being said, once you add alcohol to the mix, it's a whole different thing than when you're on the outside saying, "Oh, I can do this." So, I think the thing that keeps me consistent with trying is I have using the tools. I have a handful of tools that I use that have become second nature for me, and I now realize that I can change. How I do have power. I can make those choices. Um, and yeah, that I don't know, it's kind of an awakening that's like, hey, I've always thought of myself as this person over here, someone that can't commit to anything, someone that doesn't, really is kind of wishy-washy. Don't put me in an exercise group, because I'm not going to get to that. But through these tools I found that there are some things that I can use and make the choice to use. And it's taken a while, because it's been like 5 years now, but now the incremental changes are it kind of are still really surprising.
One thing you said in
There
there
you
was
go.
you got to know yourself better or differently or on a different note. And I
Right,
think that's so important because we know, like, intrinsically, we know that we are growing and changing and evolving just as humans as we go throughout our life, but we don't really see it that way, especially when it comes to like knowing ourselves on a personal level. And
right,
drinking is so much like I always say drinking for most people, not everyone, but for most people, drinking's not about the drinking. It might become that, but originally it's because you're stressed or it's a reward or it's your off switch or all these different things, more of these feelings and emotions that we don't want to deal with or we don't know how to deal with, that we turn to alcohol for, and then we that makes it almost impossible for us to ever know how to deal with those emotions because we've always used alcohol for it. So just getting to know
exactly.
yourself better and differently and having not only that awareness, but that curiosity, I feel like is such a big part of not only this journey, but just the whole journey, like life that we're on, right? Because this is just one
Right,
piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think obviously we use it for our coping. We don't learn, I didn't ever learn any coping
Yeah. Yeah.
mechanisms. And also just getting to know what's normal feelings, I mean, we go from with your drinking all the time, you're either really euphoric or you're really stressed or you're hungover. That's what I was anyway. So
Mhm.
and you got to realize people say, "Well, I'm anxious because I'm not drinking. I drink because I'm anxious." Some anxiety in life is normal. People that don't drink, do get nervous
Well,
about things
yeah.
and don't necessarily have an anxiety. I mean, I do realize that some people do have anxiety issues, but
Sure.
sometimes just feeling that anxiety is scary, and we have to learn
Yes.
to cope with it.
Well, and I didn't realize I didn't have very good coping skills until having children. And then you realize very quickly, like, man, I do not know how to sit in these emotions at all because I'm trying to teach these kids, like, we're all great at
Uh-huh.
labeling, like, I feel mad, I feel sad. But then what do you do with it? Like, it is so uncomfortable to sit in it. Even now, like, with my almost 5-year-old, she'll be having these big feelings, big emotions, and my rule is like as long as you don't hurt yourself or anyone else, like get the emotions out. But it is so uncomfortable for me to let her get the emotions out because I was never allowed to. So, it's like even now I'm almost like beginning to learn coping skills that I thought I had, but maybe I did when I
Right.
was younger, but I haven't had to use them in so long because I've been able to use alcohol to help with them instead. So that's a huge, huge difference. And I think that's
Yeah.
also what can be hard and intimidating, especially early on, is realizing like you are going to have to sit with discomfort. And that's,
And
it's not fun.
I think the biggest thing is that I think for me, and I hear it a lot from others, is that, you think when you're afraid that it's always going to be that way. You're afraid you're always going to want that drink. You're afraid every day is going to be hard. And you'll be very surprised when a few months go by. And it does take months. I would have said 6 months. Rehabs are usually 3 months. Um, your detox are 30 days. That doesn't get rid of that's 4 o'clock and it's time and I always have a drink and I want one now.
Yeah,
But that does go away. I didn't spend 8 years every day at 4 o'clock going, "Where's my drink?" You forget
exactly.
about it. So, and the other thing is the dullness, the flatness of life, because we've been feeding our brain this thing that gets our endorphins and our dopamine just boosted up out of this world, and then all of a sudden it doesn't have it.
Yeah.
And I was in a meeting yesterday with clinicians roundtable, and I had never heard this before about the amino acids that they're now looking at for that, because
Cool.
to feed your brain, we have to feed our brain afterwards. We have to feed it the right things to get those endorphins back in there. But that also, that flatness doesn't stay there either. I mean, all of a sudden the evenings aren't boring. Every day is not boring. You do find activities that excite you, and you'll laugh more than you ever did. You genuinely, I think, when you're drinking. So,
Yes.
I mean,
I
I think
had,
that was the biggest one. The wide awakening is like the first time you really laugh when you're not drunk, or when alcohol is totally out of your system, and you're going, "Oh my
100%.
god!"
I remember I did Vegas twice, 3 times, I don't know, sober. The first time was a baby moon, so that was, completely separate. But the next time it was like a work trip, and we went to a comedy show, and I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my life. Like genuine belly laughs, like constantly to the point. And
Right.
I'm kind of known for my laugh, not that it's a good laugh. I'm just known for the Eric laugh. But to the point to where the comedian even like looked once like, man, I'm really getting this girl going. But it's those moments where you're like, I don't need it. Like we've made it up so much in our heads that we do like alcohol equals fun that it's hard to not believe that until you're in situations where you're like, oh my God, like this is just as fun, if not way more fun. You're more present. You you don't feel like shit the next morning. You go to bed feeling good. Like, there's all these different things in there. But like you said, like it takes time to get there and it takes a lot of practice. Like, and I like to remind people, you didn't just start drinking. Like you have been drinking at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever every day or X amount of times a week for how many years? Like, it's not just all of a sudden you've been putting in the effort for a week or a month and all of a sudden, like, you're cured. Like, That's not how it works. And that's the same with
Right.
everything, not just drinking.
Right. Yeah. So, what else?
Did you call it a
I'm trying to,
wine
you can,
awakening?
I usually, I usually fill up all the silent spaces with words. So, but okay,
No,
go
I
ahead. I'm
love
sorry, I
it.
interrupted you.
Yeah, did you call it a wine awakening?
No, I think I just said an awakening,
Okay,
but
I thought you said a
I
wine
was never
awakening.
a
I'm
big
like,
wine drinker.
that is brilliant. I
I'm
like
still
that.
not a big wine drinker. And I think that's one thing, I was reading, where did I read this? Oh, it was one of the recovery org site. And they have a quiz on there that I really think, and it actually is, I think, recovery.org. And, so many people talking about, well, I'm not a wine drinker and I like my bourbon. And, there's a lot of guilt that comes around with, oh, you're a hard liquor drinker. And I tell you what, this quiz says there's no difference. We're getting the same amount of alcohol. So, I had a best friend that actually died of liver failure. And
Mm,
she never thought she had a problem because she drank beer. She drank cases of beer a night,
yeah.
but it was just beer. So, she told herself, well, it's not hard liquor, so I'm not that bad. And it's like, it's not what you're drinking, it's the amount and the alcohol percentage of it that you're
Yes.
drinking in there.
But that, I mean, that just shows
So
how much culture plays a role too, because I mean, yeah, if you're drinking straight vodka at 7 a.m., people are going to look at you. But if you're having a mimosa, no one's going to bat an
all
eye.
right,
When at the end of the day, yes, on those two notes, the alcohol content is different, absolutely, but alcohol is alcohol. So it's just
right.
interesting how culturally, like, we accept certain things you can drink at certain times, and you're not going to be like questioned, or no one's going to look at you weird.
A Bloody
Uh,
Mary. You never see anybody drink a Bloody Mary in the afternoons, or
yeah,
in the
no,
evenings.
exactly, exactly. And Mary and I obviously know each other from moderation management. I had found it after I started on my journey. But then Mary and I got very close from that, and just have always admired what you've done and just how you are with this whole thing. Tell us a little bit more. I know you retired in a sense from moderation management, but you're back for at least a moment helping out. So tell us a little bit more about moderation management and what all it offers and that type thing.
Well, I guess I kind of told you how the landscape has changed with recovery. And I do think a lot of that is due to the founders of moderation management and the researchers that actually supported uh, that moderation or just harm reduction was a choice when it comes to alcohol. Uh, right now, M has always, it's been a peer to peer group. We don't tell each other, we don't have steps. You don't say you have to do this first, although they did used to say you had to do the 30 first. We don't do that anymore. Um, but, it's just more peer to peer. We just share our stories basically. And it struggles to get by all the time, but it has survived some really bad moments in its history. And its founder, Audrey Kishon, actually did kill two people driving drunk. And so that put a big black eye on MM. But I'd like to say Audrey was one of our members. And Audrey was a member, but she wasn't all of the members. And the people that were there at that time, which was right before I joined, felt that it was worth fighting to keep MM alive. And so it has stayed alive through the years, just through this little core group that's gotten bigger and bigger. But that feel like we need this support and we need to have others know that this support is out there. I was just lucky that I was around and watching talk shows when Audrey was showing up and saying, "Hey, this is a choice for you."
Yeah.
I'm still shocked at meetings that I go to and people say, "I didn't even know this was out there. I didn't know. I didn't know there
Yeah.
was anything but AA and 12-step programs." And unfortunately, that keeps about 80% of people that identify
Mm.
themselves as having a drinking problem from getting help because they think the only thing they're going to be told is that they have to quit forever. So if there's any mission that I have is that more people need to know that they can get support. And I would say, I was one of those people thought, oh, I can do it on my own. Why can't I just do it on my own? Why can't I just go say I'm going to have 3 drinks and that's all I'm having? Uh, And it wasn't a seamless, and it wasn't like I joined MM and overnight I became a moderate drinker. I'm still trying to get to where I don't drink by the guidelines. Um, I have a problem now with getting my abstays in because I limit how much I drink. I drink very slowly. I don't have the negative effects. Very rarely drink more than 2 drinks on a day. And then I go, well, why do I need to get abstays in? You know? But I do realize that I do feel the benefits of them when I do. I got off track there, but so it's out there. There are other things out there now, as everybody knows. There's a lot of paid for. MM is free. Uh, there's a lot of paid for services out there now, or programs um, that have jumped on the bandwagon, and we're grateful for them. But we kind of get lost in the background. We're going to say, "Hey, we were here first."
Okay.
And there's apps out there. It's just like when we watch our calories, we watch our drinks.
Yeah.
It's about getting healthier, and that's one thing that's been I think a positive change I've seen. I wish it was happening faster. That people like you that are in their 20s and 30s now are finding MM, whereas before it was people that had uh, been drinking like me for years. It's
Yeah.
in their 40s and they're starting to see some of the physical detriments
Mhm.
and feel it and some of these changes that you can't reverse. So I hope that the word's getting out there. And there's a lot more movements out there like the sober curious and such. So
Totally.
millennials aren't drinking as much as us. So that's good.
Which is amazing. It's kind of mind blowing, but I am curious. Granted, I know that they're vaping a ton, which might
Yeah.
be even worse for you, like in a shorter term and long term. But
Uh-huh.
um, yeah, I am very curious. For me, more than anything, like the mental health side of things, because I know there's a lot more options out there, like weed and marijuana and CBD, and all those things are legal in a lot of places, which, including here in Colorado, which makes it a lot easier to do something like that instead. So it's kind of like switching one vice for another. But yeah, it's definitely, I'm interested to see how things go long term. But I love that kids in their, 20s, maybe even high school starting out, aren't as attracted to alcohol as I was, for example. So,
Yeah.
and thank you for sharing that
Yeah.
story about MM. One thing that I didn't even know that until doing one of the calls that we had been on. And although obviously very unfortunate that that was the case, to me it's just so insane that it was such a big deal in a sense, considering so many people that do, get in trouble for drinking and driving or kill people or get in accidents, they have been in rehab before. They've been in AA before. So it's like no program, no matter what it is out there, is a perfect solution. Nothing's ever going to go wrong from here. We're all human. Like we're trying to get better, we're trying to grow, we're trying to learn, but that doesn't mean we're not going to make mistakes.
Yeah, agreed. And when I said that 20% of people that actually do identify with problem that they're a problem drinker will go and they'll go to AA, but only a very small percent of those people will actually succeed at AA. And a lot of times, and there's no good records. We don't, it's hard to keep. People don't want to sign up and say, "Hey, I'm a member of MM. I'm a member of AA." It
Totally.
has stigma. It has negative consequences, and so it's hard to keep records on that. But I think it is somewhere between 7 to 5% that actually succeed in long-term abstinence. And you'd be surprised how many people we get that are attending AA and maybe very active in AA, and they're saying, "Yeah, but I feel like such a hypocrite." And
Yeah.
that's not saying AA is not good. It was all that was out there when people needed help. Um, you know, but and it saved a lot of lives. But you're right. It is like, how many people did we see that do get in these horrible accidents that have had DUIs before and they've been forced to go through these programs and they are not working. So, let's give them more choices out there. I mean, we've
Exactly.
got medication now that will help you. You've got, um, yeah, like I said, a myriad of programs. But AA, especially rehab's a big business, so
Yeah.
they don't want to hear that. How do you do a
Exactly.
rehab for somebody that's trying to moderate? It's like, hey, everybody, and today's night's cocktail hour,
Yeah.
and we're going to drink moderately. But we get asked often, why, and I am jealous of AA's community, sense of community, and we get lots of times, why don't you have sponsors? And because with MM, and we're trying to say we don't want to take you away. How many people go to rehab for 30 days and they come out and they're gung ho, and then they it doesn't work. So it's more to learn the tools that you need in the real world, in your everyday world.
Yes. And that's
So
exactly it. It's all about setting you up for success long term because this is something that again, you're not magically going to be cured and like never want to drink again type thing. Like it's something that some days are going to be easier, some days are going to be more of a difficult struggle, but it's just getting through each day and getting through it the best that you can.
well, and I want to talk a little bit about the tools because one thing, like I said, I thought the only tool you needed was to say, oh my gosh, I'm only gonna have 4 drinks tonight. I'm only gonna have 3 drinks tonight. That was it, and that should be enough. If you can't do that and then walk away, then you've got a big problem. Uh, I'm a real big believer in how you drink is as important as how much you drink,
Mhm.
and for me, that key is keeping that BAC blood alcohol concentration down below 0.05. I
Mhm.
now measure my drinks. I drink very slowly. I like my bourbon, but I get that standard 1.5 ounces, and I put it in a glass, a regular drinking glass, and I make it last, an hour, at least an hour. And I can tell when I don't do that. I can tell once that blood alcohol goes up too fast, and it's
Oh
a
yeah.
lot harder to get it back down once of that. So, I think we talked about this at the clinicians roundtable that MM holds every month yesterday, is that a lot of us come into this thinking, well, I want to keep all the good stuff that I like about drinking, which includes getting drunk or tipsy. We all want to keep that sweet spot. I just want to get rid of all the bad stuff,
Yeah.
the hangovers, the not sleeping, the
Don't we
fighting with
all?
my. So how do I do that? And it's like, no, you don't get to keep the getting drunk. You don't get to keep. Oh, I'm going to reach this level right here, and then I'm going to slow down. I mean, very few people can do that. So, you don't go get a shot at the bar and then follow that up with 2 cocktails and then say, okay, now I'm
No,
primed,
I'm done. Yeah.
and now I'm going to go slow the rest of the night. It doesn't work that way. So you really have to kind of say, I don't no longer want to get drunk anymore, or at least my normal is not going to be feeling this euphoria that I'm used to feeling. I want to drink, but I want to drink in a controlled manner that I don't go over the top. And that's not saying it's not enjoyable. I
Oh,
I,
totally.
I very rarely feel the effects. I mean, I love my 4:30. I go out in Colorado. These days are getting very very few. I'm in Colorado also. I go out and sit outside with a book, and I'm sorry, going out with a cup of tea or my regular diet Pepsi just doesn't fit what I'm
Doesn't hit
looking
the same.
for. And even though, yeah, it's just a sense of kind of a celebration, but
Yeah.
uh, and I like the taste.
Yeah.
So I never thought I'd be a person that said, "Oh, I drink for the taste," because I didn't.
Totally.
I didn't care what I drank. Yeah.
Exactly. You just want it. But that's one, the awareness and understanding of what you actually wanted, and that's changed and evolved for you. But it's also, and you had kind of brought it up earlier that you're not like necessarily hitting the guidelines specifically. But in my mind, and again, I'm not a doctor, this is not medical advice, but in my mind, it's all about harm reduction. And so it doesn't matter, if it's for women 7 to 10, we'll say 7 drinks a week is like the recommended whatever. What works best for you and what's realistic? Because it doesn't matter if you hit that 7 once and then you binge the next 3 weeks and then come back and hit that 7. It's going to be much better for you if maybe you're doing 10, but it's, you're more maintained rather than the major binge,
Right.
so like make it work for you. And again, as you're going through this, things are going to change. So before, like 4 drinks, no problem for me. Now, like I don't even have two
Exactly.
drinks a lot of the time, which is again bonkers. Like if you were to ask not only myself, but anyone that knew me 4 or 5 years ago, like would I be doing this right now, helping people drink less? I think every one of us would put every penny we owned on you're out of your damn mind. No, Erica likes to drink, right? But it's just like things
Yeah.
change over time, but it's you have to put in the work, the effort, and really get to know yourself on that different level because that's so much what it's all about.
Now I want to come back and be the interviewer in a minute, but because I want to ask you about that, how much you changed. But that's what I've found. I have found that when I concentrate, and as I'm not a executive director of MM, I can, or a representative of MM at this point, I can say, I found that fighting to get those abs days in ended up with me binging more, on the days that I could drink because it was such a big deal. And so I found out when I kind of just relax the abs days and say, if you want to drink today, you can have a drink today, and I do a lot better. I do. The negative physical consequences aren't as bad. I'm not wiped out for 3 or 4 days because I had a heavy Friday night. I'm like you. I cannot drink. 4 drinks is going to affect my sleep. It's going to affect my energy level the next day. I'm getting to where 3 does now, and so 2, uh, yeah, yeah, taken slowly. And I have started substituting. I like the Kim Crawfords. They have her eliminate, I think it is her Sauvignon, which is only half the ABV, the alcohol by
Yeah.
volume. So 2 glasses is 1 drink, or 2 5-ounce servings is 1 drink, and that does it for me. It's still saying, hey, I get an adult beverage with my book. And I've
Yes.
also started to. I found Verde Vino Verde, whatever, a green
Yes.
wine that's
They
not.
have the lower now
So
too,
it's
right?
there. Uh-huh.
Yeah, they're the lower now too, right? The Vino Verde.
Yeah, they're point
Yeah.
0.9, and so they're bubbly. They're not too dry, not too sweet. So they're just it hits just right. And
Yeah.
like I said, I feel like I'm getting my adult beverage. So you do all these little tricks and trades that they would have told us, or back in the day that that means you're an alcoholic if you're working that hard to control your drinking. And it's like, we don't say that about other things.
But
So
yeah, if someone's having 100 calorie snack instead of like the full throttle thing, you're not questioning them. So yeah, it's the same exact thing.
I want to ask you then, like when you change so much, when your friends, because I was the same kind of uh, person. I was the partier. I was the people that if they wanted to party, they called me because they weren't gonna. I was gonna keep up, and probably they weren't. They weren't gonna feel bad about themselves. So did you feel like did you lose any friends when you changed,
I
or did
definitely
the relationships?
lose any friends. Things can change. They can be different for sure. I'm at this kind of came at a good time in my life where I was having children. A lot of my friends are having children. So we were already going through like, there was always someone not drinking, typically because of pregnancy. So that kind of like helps make it easier. But I think what I saw early on is when people do get a little timid, awkward, whatever around you, it's because they're afraid that you're judging them or worried, they're starting to question themselves and they don't want to do that. And I would be
Right.
I mean, anyone who knows me, especially like my closest friends, know that I do not judge at all.
No.
And no, you could literally have the whole bottle of wine to yourself and I'm drinking soda water and I'm not going to care. Like, because it was such a personal thing. And I think people saw really quickly that it was about me. It was not about them. I didn't care what they were doing. All I cared about was how I was treating myself. And that's what people really took to. And the other thing I noticed was it helped a lot of my girlfriends like have the permission to drink less too. Because, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times we go out for happy hour and it was always like, oh yeah, I'll do another. And then everyone says I'll do another. But now I'm the first person that's like, oh, I'm going to switch to whatever. And almost everyone switches because they don't feel like they have to keep drinking anymore. Where before it was like, we just all kept going together. So it almost offers the permission that if you want to keep drinking, great, but you don't have to. It
Yeah.
makes it more comfortable to not be questioned if, oh, I only want to have 1 glass of wine and that be it, type thing. So that's kind of the biggest things that I've noticed. But throughout the journey, you definitely see like it's when people are making judgments on you where you feel like that, a lot of times it's how they're feeling about themselves. And we're humans, we're all afraid of being judged or looked down upon, so that's always what I try to keep in mind myself and with any of my clients, like let them know as well. Like, you got to be graceful with everyone else as well as yourself because there's a lot of shame around this. That's literally why my business is Shame Over, because there's just so much shame. And
Right.
shame is judgment. So
Right. And I think that's so true. And I found with I'm an older crowd, obviously, and I was around like a sailboating community, and then we moved to Mexico, and it's a lot of retirees, a lot of people that aren't working. You socialize, you drink, And I didn't lose any of my close friends, and they didn't change their drinking at all.
Yeah.
Believe me, they all just drank it. I was a designated driver, and but I found that people that didn't know me didn't take, we weren't invited then, where we were always very social. Then all of a sudden,
Sure.
even though my husband still drank, even though I had, all of a sudden we weren't getting invites. And I think that is a stigma. And in fact, I used to have the same stigma. It's like, oh, I can remember a friend of ours on a sailboat. All of a sudden, we weren't inviting him down over for sundowners or his wife because you know what? Well, the next year he came back and he was drinking again. And I'm sure that was part of it that that he felt ostracized,
Yeah.
and that's too bad that our society is that way.
Hmm.
Drinking is a big society. Most of us don't learn how to drink, and I've
Oh,
heard, and I don't know if it's true, that the European countries or the Italians, the French people, where kids, are taught how to
young age.
incorporate alcohol into their meals, they probably have a little bit better control. I don't know if that's true because if you ask anybody, they'll say, "Oh my God, anybody doesn't matter where you're from. I'm from this country, and you're big drinkers. I'm from this
Yeah.
country, and I have a problem." And a lot of these countries are now coming to the forefront saying, "Yeah, we do have an alcohol problem." So,
Oh, totally. There's just
so
so much interesting stuff in there. And I think one thing, like as you're talking about the sailboat story, I definitely know people, the invites have come and gone, I will say that. But I think a lot of times they're like afraid you're not going to be fun. And it's like, one, obviously, like it's very person to person. But one of my best friends, that was one of the biggest compliments she gave me was she's like, I was really afraid that you weren't going to be fun when you weren't drinking or like drinking a lot less. But she's like, I don't know why I thought that because you were pregnant at my wedding and like you were the most fun person there. Like, so it's like just kind of these preconceived notions that we have. Um, yeah, that just really stuck out to me when you said that.
yeah.
Well,
All right.
do you have any final thoughts or advice or for anyone listening, anything that maybe you've been wanting to say or that just comes to mind that you want to make sure people hear?
I guess I would just say, start with the steps that you can take. Uh, and as Erica says, feel the freedom to actually explore what's working for you. I mean, too many times when we put limits out there, we put numbers out there, we uh, we don't recognize the progress that we're making, and all we do is measure ourselves by the yardstick that other people have put there. And sure, we all know that the only healthy level of drinking is zero drinking. That is it. There, but we decide to take a risk, and what we're trying to do is minimize risk to our relationships, to our health, to our own sense of well-being. And so, like, it's not what somebody else says you should be doing. It's you figuring out what works for you. And for me, I'll just share mine that works, my tools that work is for me, it is that measuring, making sure I measure, um, keeping that BAC in mind. When I go out to a bar, which isn't very often, I do carry a breathalyzer with me just to make sure that, more of it's out of curiosity. Since I'm not mixing the drink, I want to know where I am. Sometimes I'm over that, sometimes I'm out, but I want to know before I get home that I've started coming down. But anyway, and for me, it's make it last an hour. Try to make those drinks last longer and longer. Don't tell yourself, no, I can't have that another drink. I can't have this. Just say, if I have that other drink, I'm going to do this first,
Mm.
or I'm going to have an NA, or I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to take 20 minutes. And if I still want that other drink, if I've reached my limit of whatever I've set that night, and man, I want that other drink, I always want that other drink. I just say, you can have it if you wait 20 minutes. And I could say probably 99% of the time, I never fix another drink. Another thing that I stuck with me is I have a shut off time. I'm old. I don't go out to the bars. My very rarely, and that's when my shut off time goes away. But my shut off time every night is 7. Now some people don't start till then, and
Yeah.
but my body just knows now. I never think about having. It never says I'm never there at 8 o'clock going, oh gosh, I'd like to have a drink right now. My body doesn't even think about it. So you can retrain your body, your mind, actually. You can retrain your mind to
Yes.
where it gets used to a different routine. So I think that's the thing is don't just concentrate on the drinking. Think of new routines to implement. So there's
Yes.
mine. Right.
And
The
I
tools were in there.
No, that's amazing because I feel like the tools are kind of the most important part of this whole thing because what works for you won't necessarily work for me, but what works for you probably doesn't work for you every single time. So that's why having multiple tools in your toolbox is so, so, so huge. One thing that I absolutely love there, I'm the kind of person as well that the all or nothing mentality does not work. That's again why I created what I did because you tell me that I can't drink, then guess what? I am going to binge tonight if I can't drink starting tomorrow. Like it's just that whole
Right.
thing. So just with you saying, instead of saying, no, I can't have that, wait 20 minutes and then see that alone, like it's our bodies and our brains are it's part of our survival, like having the feast or famine type thing. Like, so if we know we can't have something, it does make us want it more. So just with your whole
Right.
mindset, like I'm not saying no, I'm saying yes, you can, but wait, XYZ. That right there just shows the power of like just changing your tone, changing your mindset, all of that. So
All right. Well,
awesome.
thank you, Erica.
Thank
I
you
got to
so
get to another
much.
meeting here. If everybody wants
Yeah,
another meeting, I run the pond meeting at 1 o'clock at 1 o'clock Mountain Time for MMs. If anybody ever wants to jump on that.
perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here and for all you've done for MM, for me, for everyone. So, and everyone tuning in and listening, thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Mary.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.